Multiple fire insurance companies in LA mysteriously canceled their fire insurance coverage just a few weeks before the massive fires in LA.
I know I'm not supposed to be here, but this is my parents' home.
I know the feeling.
And they just they got canceled from their fire insurance. So they're dealing with this. They're 90 years old. And through the state of California, because of this, they're 90 years old. They've lived in this house for 75 years, and they've had the same insurance. And these insurance people decided to cancel their fire. And we're going through this, and it just happened, and they have no fire insurance.
How the hell is it even legal in the first place for fire insurance companies, or any insurance for that matter, to just randomly cancel after a customer has been paying in for years? Capitalists continue to prove every day that they are completely irredeemable scum. This should literally be considered treasonous behavior. Democrats are desperately pleading to people not to politicize this tragedy because they know if we did, their ass will be in trouble. As more information becomes available to us, it becomes clear that the devastating effects of this fire are the results of neoliberal rot in California. Karen Bass, the neoliberal mayor of LA, cut funding from firefighting in order to fund the LAPD to record levels. And how exactly is that working for you guys, by the way? Do you feel safe? The ruling class hates when we politicize tragedies because it exposes their incompetence and because they don't want to be held responsible for their failure.
Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them?
The United States Congress just voted in overwhelming fashion to sanction the International Criminal Court for putting charges up against the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. We are witnessing the Zionist-occupied United States in complete rebellion against international law. As LA is burning and countless families have their entire lives upended, the primary concern of the United States Congress is to protect the war criminals in Israel. Every single member of Congress who voted for this should be impeached and tried for treason. It is not patriotism to support your country being ran by criminals. Members of Congress advocate for harsh, authoritarian law and order against the American people. Meanwhile, endorse relaxed, laissez-faire interpretation of the law when it comes to war criminals like Benjamin Netanyahu and the ruling class. The same people who cheer on the war crimes in Israel and cheer on the United States assault against international law are the people who had the nerve to lecture the working class about cheering Luigi Maggioni. The fact that the United States Congress is waging war against international law in order to protect a war criminal like Benjamin Netanyahu is why more and more Americans are starting to endorse the tactics used by Luigi Maggioni.
Well, good morning, my friends. What's poppin'? Welcome to RBN Live. Nick in the morning, Nick at any time. I showed you guys the last two hotspots I did. Welcome back to RBN. As you guys see, and this is what I laid out in the video, we're seeing the Western ruling class in complete rebellion against the concepts of international law. The same way we are now seeing both Republicans and Democrats fighting against the concept of free speech. Now they're going to advance an anti-Semitism bill They already promising they're going to put on the floor as soon as Donald Trump take office. So isn't it interesting that a lot of those free speech MAGA influencers led to one of the biggest free speech crackdowns that we're going to see in modern times? And the same people, and I say this in the video, who advocate for giant police budgets, civil asset forfeiture, and giant police states which don't even reduce crime. But they believe that we should be a victim of harsh authoritarian states because the workers and the peasants are violent and not to be trusted. That's what Americans believe. Those same Americans are allowing white-collar criminals and war criminals to give address to Congress, which Benjamin Netanyahu did. Every single House member, and this includes Hakeem Jeffries, that invited Benjamin Netanyahu to speak at Congress like they did last year, should be tried for treason. Every single person who voted for this bill, including 40 plus Democrats, should be tried for treason. This is why Ro Khanna didn't even understand that he had no chance of possibly ever winning me over, because you would never be able to explain to me your support of a state that systemically support the right to rape prisoners to death. Israel blocked the UN probe into, the mass rapes of Hamas. That they will complain about mass rapes of Hamas, but they didn't want that investigated because they are afraid that inquiry will lead to the massive systemic abuse of Palestinians by Israel, including Palestinians that was raped to death, being exposed. And now we have a country, and here's the MAGA types, here's the New York Post, and that's MAGA. That's why I said MAGA sold to Israel, because MAGA is the Republican Party. People made a mistake of thinking that the Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson wing had the most influence. No, it was always the Ben Shapiros. It was always the Marion Aldersons who told Donald Trump to crack down on free speech on behalf of Israel. Now you have the New York Post, and now you have all these right-wing people that are saying that the Senate should pass the ICC sanctions bill. You have Richie Torres, Democrat, saying, making a passionate plea about that. We show you guys that here soon. But before I chime in more on this, I want to bring in our resident geopolitical politics expert, amazing international journalist and blogger. I love his tweets on Twitter. You guys check him out. Thank you for joining us on RBN, S.O. Cathin. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, sir. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always great to have you on. It's always great, especially as an American, to speak to people from an international perspective. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember. I think you reported out in India, but
yes.
Either way, it's great to have people and getting that international perspective. And I'm very interested in getting your perspective on what's going on in the current geopolitical sphere we're in right now. First, regarding Viktor Orban, he said he's willing to protect Benjamin Netanyahu from the ICC. You have all these Western leaders that claim they're willing to protect Netanyahu. You saw the coverage of Congress wanting to sanction the ICC. I want to get your initial impressions of this and how the international working class is viewing the terrorist state that I'm living in, that unapologetically defending Israeli terrorism. What is your perspective on these current events? Catherine, thank you for joining us again.
Sure. Well, it's shocking, but it's not shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not shocking because of the lobbying. I mean, the Israeli lobby basically owns the U.S. and the West. There's not a single person like in Europe. Well, there are like a few, like a very handful. But in the powerful countries like the UK, Germany, France, nobody dares to speak out against Israel, And same like in Australia, the US. It's like they're all bought and paid for, and they have no morality. They have no sense of right and wrong. they've no spine, and they just, I mean, well, if the ICC says that Putin did something wrong, okay, so they all jump on it. Then, they jump on the social media. They go, Putin is a war criminal. He should be arrested. And then same thing like for, the African nations. Just look at the number of the African leaders who have been arrested by the ICC and by, the ICJ. So this is just a blatant, modern form of colonialism. They just use that to oppress and to weaken the non-white nations, basically. It's just pure racism mixed with imperialism, and it's just terrible. And what these morons don't realize is that the world is changing rapidly. Okay, so we are going to see the multipolar world, and in 10, 15 years, the table will be reversed, right? And then the global south can just come back at the US and Europe with vengeance, right? And they will have a long list of, the grievances. They'll go down the list for like 1 hour. They're like, hey, CIA did this. The MI6 did that. You waged this illegal war. You supported the Al-Qaeda. You supported the Nazis in Ukraine, the ISIS in Syria. You killed Palestinians. You committed genocide in Gaza. Blah, blah, blah. There'll be a huge long list, and they're going to go after them. So these people, they lack the ability to think about the future. It's like think of like a young woman, like 21, 22. She's so hot, but she cannot even picture that when she's 40, she's not going to be so hot, and she won't be able to get into the dance clubs.
Yeah.
So, so it's like, the US is so young and so full of itself and so arrogant, and it doesn't know anything about the history, and they just, they talk, like people like Blinken. They love to use the word rules-based international order. Right? And then if you say, like, where are the rules? Do you have a document? Do you have a PDF document that I can read on the web, about the rules-based international order? There are no rules. Okay, there's only one rule, that the imperialists and the globalists will win all the time, and they can do whatever they want, and the rules change, the logic changes. It's just like, it's like but trying to deal with like a 7-year-old kid. Like you can't tell the kid how logic works.
Yeah, and by doing stuff like this, the United States is only isolating itself even more. There are many countries that are not even like ideologically driven, but after seeing the United States sanction and punish countries for not being strong supporters of the Ukraine war, not supporting Israel, they're now more willing to do business with China now, because of how the United States is wielding their foreign policy in a way where essentially might makes right. The international rules-based order is essentially, we can do it, but you cannot do that. And that's why we're seeing the white Western societies melt down at the idea of the ICC going after Benjamin Netanyahu. And honestly, they have to do this, guys. Like, they have to go after the ICC, because if they don't, What does that imply? That implies that every single person, every single House member, Joe Biden and his entire team who voted to send weapons to Benjamin Netanyahu, even though he was a war criminal, was in violation of Leahy's law. So they have to do this to protect their ass, guys. So of course they have to attack international institutions. And this is why we call out this hypocrisy of the rules-based order since day one. This is why I question, this is why I have a conversation that scare white people. Why I question, like, what does it even mean to be a terrorist? You know, are you a terrorist because if you're defending yourself against the apartheid genocidal regime who is invading your land? Or are you a terrorist when you threaten international courts that is willing to hold your warmonger friends accountable? I say it's the latter. The people who believe that the Arabs and the Muslims and all these people are terrorists. No, it's the West that is waging war, that passed a bill where they would have invaded The Hague if they arrested George Bush and any of these Zionist terrorists. Which leads me to this video. I want you to reply to this here, because this is one of the many reasons why it's a fool's errand for Ro Khanna or any of these progressives to think they could ever win us back into this party. This is Richie Torres of the Democratic Party. The Democrats. That is making an argument on why we should sanction the ICC, as they didn't want us to have Trump derangement syndrome, because they say, oh, Trump, he will attack the rule of law. Trump is a threat to democracy and the rules of law, as Democrats team up with the quote-unquote fascist MAGA Republicans in order to attack the rule of law. So I know that was a long spill. Let me play the video, and Catherine, I'll pass it to you if you want to chime in on anything you hear.
ICC's decision to issue arrest warrants against the leadership of Israel represents the weaponization of international law at its most egregious. The ICC has set a precedent for criminalizing self-defense. Any country daring to defend itself against an enemy that exploits civilians as human shields will face persecution, posing as prosecution. The ICC ignores the cause and context of the war. Israel did not initiate the war. The war was imposed upon Israel by the unbridled barbarism of Hamas on October 7th. Not only did Hamas wage war on Israel, causing the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust, it carefully constructed a battlefield designed to maximize the loss of civilian life. None of that context seems to matter to the kangaroo court of the ICC, which cannot let facts get in the way of its ideological crusade against the Jewish state. The ICC should be sanctioned, not for enforcing the law, but for distorting it beyond recognition.
This is the Democratic Party, guys. This is AOC's friend.
God. And this guy has, yeah. I mean, it's like whatever he said was a lie. It was just like one lie after another lie after another lie. Okay, first of all, the war did not start on October 7th, 2023. Okay, What the hell is this? Okay, the war started. The war started back in the 1930s, the 1940s, way before 1948 with the founding of Israel. You know, before Israel was founded, these guys, the Zionists, were like murdering Palestinians and committing ethnic cleansing, and they were the terrorists. You know, so like if you go look at the British, the American, the newspapers from the late 1930s, the 1940s, then you would see, I mean, all these the titles about the Jewish terrorists, right? So they had these groups called Lehigh, Stern Gang, blah blah blah. So there were these three major terrorist groups, you know, and they would kill British citizens. They would kill Palestinians. They would blow up the hotels and the train tracks. They killed the UN guy from Sweden. He went to Israel to negotiate peace. And this terrorist, he murdered the UN lead. So he was like a very, very high profile, sort of like a Swedish noble. And he was murdered by this Jewish terrorist who later on became the prime minister of Israel. So like if you look at the first few the prime ministers of Israel until like the 1980s or so, they all used to be the leaders of these terrorist groups, And as for Palestinians and the Hamas being terrorists, the international law says if you are being occupied, then you have the right to fight back. Okay, so there's no such thing as a terrorist, right? Like if I come to your home and I put a gun to your head and I steal your, the home, and I lock you up in a room and I give you one piece of bread every day through the window, and you fight back, then who is the terrorist? Like me, who locked you up and who's depriving you of the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, all the amendments that the Americans love, and the Palestinians have no rights, right? So like they have no human rights in Gaza or in the West Bank. So they live in this the prison, and then they get bombed every couple of years. They don't have access to like an airport. They cannot leave Gaza by land or by sea. Their food is controlled by Israel. The electricity, water are controlled by Israel. And the Israelis, they actually measure the amount of the calories per person that goes into Gaza. So they're like under, like just alive. Okay, so they don't want to kill 2 million people, and they want them to be just barely alive.
Yeah, and to the point, there are people who say, and I'll pass right back to you, Catherine, but there are people who say that Israel's not. They'll say, Israel's not occupying Gaza. They're not. How can you say they're not occupying Gaza when they have the ability to stop the shipment of food, their electricity? That is literally the definition of occupying power. The quick question: can Russia shut off our power? Like if Russia wanted to shut off the power of New York, can they do that? They can't, because they're not occupying America. The fact that Israel has the ability, and guys, just repeat this whenever you hear some Zionist dickheads say, "Oh, Israel not occupying Gaza." The fact that they can even cut off supplies to Gaza like that is evidence of their occupation. But sorry, go ahead and finish your thought, Captain.
Yeah. So, so for a long time, the Israelis used to really, fully occupy Gaza. They used to be living in Gaza. They had the settlements and so on. So then in around 2005 or so, so they had a very, very smart idea. So like this is where the Palestinians, they lacked smartness. So what the Israelis did was to split the Palestinians. Okay, so like if you go back to 1992, the whole world said, okay, it's time to create a separate statehood for Palestine. And then the Israeli Prime Minister, I think Rabin, so I might get the name wrong, but I think Rabin was the Israeli Prime Minister, and he was a leftist, and he was okay with peace with the Palestinians. So Bill Clinton, he brought him over, and there's this famous photo of the Israeli Prime Minister shaking hands with the PLO leader, which is the Palestinian liberation organization, and it was Yasser Arafat. So then Bill Clinton brought the Israelis and the Palestinian leaders. They shook hands and they said, "Okay, we will work towards a two-state solution." So that was a huge deal. We were so close to reaching peace. And then that's when the right-wing group with Netanyahu, the Likud party, they rose up. And what did they do? They murdered, the Israeli prime minister who wanted peace with the Palestinians. So since then, it's been downhill, and since then, so Netanyahu, he wrote a white paper along with the neocons from the U.S., the Jewish guys like Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, and these other guys. So they got together and they wrote this white paper called, the Clean Break. So the Clean Break said, forget about all this peace movement that's been going on. We need to redefine the Middle East, and we're going to defeat all the people who don't bow to Israel, like Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas. So, they had this the dream list of all these the countries that should be defeated. And guess what happened? Well, Israel got the U.S. to do all the dirty job. And the Americans are so foolish that they're going and fighting in Israel, in the Middle East, but dying, making long-term, the enemies, and wasting trillions and trillions of dollars. It's very, very stupid for the U.S. to fight on behalf of Israel rather than forcing Israel to find peace, right? And then if you look at, the Hamas, so this is where the Palestinians were not shrewd, okay? So the Palestinians are not very geopolitically smart. So what the Israelis did was they said, man, the Palestinians are so nice that we are forced to, sign the peace deal, So we have to make the Palestinians the bad guys. So how do we do that? So they found this fringe group in Palestinians who are more feisty, and the West gave money to this radical group. And the Israelis, okay, so Netanyahu, he's on record was saying that we need to fund the Hamas. Okay, so this is what a lot of people cannot understand. That, the Israelis and the Americans, they funded Hamas because that's how they were able to split the Palestinian group. Okay, so one became the Fatah group, the moderate Palestinians, and then the Hamas, the more feisty group. So now Netanyahu has an excuse saying, oh, well, Hamas is a terrorist group. So how can we make a deal with the terrorists? So this is a very, very smart Machiavellian scheme. And if the Palestinians had been smart, they would have stayed as one group, So
only, and I think that's an accurate depiction of what happened. The only pushback and the only thing I kind of implore, I don't think it has anything to do with the intelligence of the Palestinians. I think the Palestinians were put in such an impossible position. All groups have sellouts. Like we deal with this in the Black community. I'm sure people deal with this in India. People who want to live an easier life, so they join the empire and imperialism, and they tend to sell people out. This is what I view, and I talk to me like radical, quote unquote radical Palestinian groups who just want to liberate their land. There are a lot of people like the Palestinian Authority who undermine Palestinian resistance. And when you look at people who joined Hamas, I can't blame them in their intelligence, because the majority of people of Hamas are orphans. And many of these people who also joined Hamas also tried to protest peacefully. If people have a critique that maybe Hamas shouldn't have engaged on October 7th because it was too early and the resistance wasn't ready, I think that's a legitimate criticism, I'm sure. But I think the Palestinians was put in a position where they had no choice, because the peace has been shown to be completely off the table. International law completely abandoned them. But other than that, I think your analysis is generally good. I just don't want to put the onus and the blame on the Palestinians. I think they was in such a hard position. My anger, and I think I'm speaking as an American, my anger goes towards America. Maybe this is my position. Maybe we disagree on this, but as an American, as someone who funds the Zionist regime, I never ever want to blame the Palestinians. That's just my thoughts, though. Anything you want to add before I move on, Catherine?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. So I'm just, like saying, like from a big picture point of view, like say, for example, there is a white cop who is just like waiting for like an excuse to shoot you, right? And he comes and says something, So then you want to be like super, super safe, So you don't want to give that racist cop like one excuse to shoot you.
Sure.
So then in that point, then the responsibility lies on you. Like, even though that it's not fair, so that it's not, right. And so you are like submitting yourself, but it's just a matter of survival. I mean, at that point,
Yeah. I hear
So,
you.
okay. So that said, so what happened on the October 7th? Well, I don't think that the Hamas killed 1,000 Israelis. Okay, so maybe the maximum the Hamas killed maybe 100 civilians. Okay, so the rest, the 900, were actually murdered by, the IDF.
Yeah.
So they had all these the tanks and the helicopters. And if you look at the photo of the cars in the parking lot of the music festival, they were all shot from the top. Like you see this, like cars after cars after cars, fully burned and fully shot down. Okay, so the Hamas didn't have the time to go and burn the cars one by one and to waste their bullets on the empty cars. But this was done by the IDF, and there were even like a few videos of the Israeli women and the soldiers talking about this. What is the principle? Like they have the Solomon principle or something like that. Like where the Israelis they don't care if the Israelis die. So like if one, the Hamas guy, he has like the hostage, okay, and if there are but 10 people in like a big family of 10 Israelis with the Hamas person, the IDF will kill the 10 Israelis to kill one Hamas. Okay, and that is the official policy of Israel. So what happened on October 7th was, basically the Hamas, they went and captured the IDF soldiers. So I don't think they went in to kill babies or behead babies, all this nonsensical.
Yeah, according to Hamas, and I know people who don't want to quote Hamas because they're terrorists. According to Hamas, the intention was not to kill civilians.
Yeah.
And
Why would they kill civilians?
exactly. And according to them, and a lot of people are sympathetic to Hamas, I will say that, a lot of the civilians who died was Israelis who was armed, who started shooting at agents of Hamas. And obviously you can't blame them, they're in a high tense situation. But if you're a person of Hamas and you see someone shooting you, they assume that they're IDF. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's not like
yeah.
So I can see that happening too. Some civilians died, and that's what was reported because they would start. And I don't blame anyone in that situation because I would obviously start shooting too. Like, you know what I mean? But so they were confused, and obviously that was part of civilians dying. But the mass rapes, we completely debunked that. That's absurd. like in a such high speed military operation where something else that's not discussed. There was around 200, 300 Hamas fighters who died during October 7th. It was a very dangerous operation, high casualties for Hamas. So why would you stop and take a rate break? And you got Apache helicopters firing down at you. You have settlers who's armed, who's shooting at you. There's always the possibility of friendly fire in combat as well. You have all these factors. You watch your friends, your family, people your comrades in arms being slaughtered. But you also
so you're like, hold on, okay, so like there are some tanks and helicopters, but I really need to shoot this grandma, okay? I really don't like this grandma. I need to spend the next 15 minutes finding out where she is, and I have to kill the grandma, before I, it doesn't make sense.
And you did such a great job debunking all the Richie Torres bullshit. I'm glad that you saved me some time because as you guys see, like just quoting international law and studying history and equipping ourselves. This is why it's extremely important for us as a peace movement, as an anti-imperialist working class movement. We must equip ourselves with knowledge. We can't allow, and there is a coordinated effort in the West of dumbing down the populace and creating an era of anti-intellectualism. This is where you people, the woke mob. No, woke just mean being aware, being understanding who your enemies are. And I know we beat this dead horse a lot on RBN, but the idea of woke originally was used in the Black communities in the 70s and the 80s as a way to uplift brothers. Like, hey man, you woke, you understand that our enemy is the man, not us. So whenever we have people gangbanging and killing each other, robbing each other, they're not woke. They don't understand who the real enemies are. But the people who focus on uplifting the community, who understand that the police state and the capitalist class is the true enemy. That's, hey man, you woke, brother. That's what you already know who the true enemy is. You guys see how they turn that into a negative? And don't get me wrong, the liberal class played their part of that as well. Because I understand the criticism of the woke liberal class. I understand that criticism, but you guys see how they play their part in helping the right demonize having an intellectual working class movement. And that's why it's extremely important for us to push back. And that's why the Israeli lobby, and this will lead to my next segment I want to ask you about. The fact that they are so overwhelmed by facts. You guys saw when I debated Rokana on resistance and whether the state of Israel has the right to exist. That was easy work. You guys saw the viral clip. Easy work. And that's why you see the Zionists advocate for censorship, because that's what you do when you're intellectually outmatched. And even the people that are good on this issue, who I don't have hate toward, like the Iron Carols and all these people, I see them, Dave Smith, I see them criticize Israel, and then they will turn around and say, "Oh, I don't mean." And I saw Iron Carol do this, and this fucking infuriates me. He's like, "Oh well, I'm not talking about Hamas. Of course, Hamas are terrorists." Even the people who are good on Israel, they will say that. Like the MAGA anti-Israel people, Dave Smith, Ian Carroll, they say stuff like, "Oh yeah, I hate Israel, but I hate Hamas too." The fuck you talking about? If you think Israel is a legal terrorist state, like many of them do, that means you're supposed to support Hamas because you're a fucking American. Are we Americans or not? Americans, we believe in the Second Amendment and the right to oppose tyranny, and then we have these white MAGA cucks who say, "Oh no, I don't believe in the right to resist tyranny when it comes to Palestinians and Black and brown people." And this dynamic is why I don't view those people as inherently good if you do oppose Palestinian resistance. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's a conversation to have about tactics, which I think Catherine did as well. I think there should be argument about tactics, but condemning it as a whole is completely red flag to me. But before I get into another rant, I want to ask you in general. Here's the headline. Jonathan Greenblatt. You guys know the ADL labeled me as an anti-Semite. One of the greatest.
Really?
It was a viral tweet. It was a blast. One of the greatest honors.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So here's the headline. I want to ask you. I mean, you can take it anywhere you want. I know I went on a rant.
So there are like a lot of Jewish people who have spoken out against that. Like there was this woman who was called the human rights. The lady of human rights of Israel or something like that. So she came on. The Democracy Now! Show, and so you can find that like from 15, 20 years ago. And she says, so like this is the trick that we use. If some guy from the US is going to criticize Israel, we say that the person is anti-Semitic. And if somebody from Europe criticizes Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust and we shut them up. So like this is just a trick, So, like if you say anything bad about Israel, they're like, oh, you hate the Jews, don't you? You bad anti-Semitic guy, So, so they play, like they are very smart with words, and they do a lot of, poll. So they found that if you speak about, say, land, and if you speak about the occupation, if you speak about the people in West Bank in terms of the land and the settlers, the Israeli settlers, then like 75-80% of the Americans, they support the Palestinians, right? Yeah. But if you flip that and if you reframe the argument as the Israelis fighting terrorism, then the polls, they shift. Okay, then suddenly 75-80% of Americans, they support Israel. So it's like, so for example, like, so as if you ask people, do you support, the death tax? Okay, so most people will say, no, I don't support the death tax. You know? But if you frame the death tax as something else, I forgot what it was called before. So then people would say, yes, I support that tax. It's, fair, right? So it's the framing of the words. So, the Israelis, like a lot of them are lawyers, and their whole the religion is based on this book called our Talmud, right? And if you read the Talmud, it's like a bunch of crazy lawyers, okay, splitting hair, and they can justify anything, like there is this like one passage from a Sanhedrin, where it says, if you have sex with a child that's below the age of 3, it's okay because of da 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 da. So, like, if you bring in the, so it's like a very legalistic society, as it's not based on, the morality, like, Jesus and Christianity. It's about, the morality, where there is a very strong sense of right and wrong. And the problem we have is this, like, see?
It's funny, and on that point, Catherine, I'll pass it right back to you. It's funny whenever like these hardcore Israeli rabbis, they say the quiet part out loud. They'll say, "Yeah, I believe that Jews have the right to rape non-Jews," and then people will freak out, and even like some quote unquote emphasis on the quote unquote moderate Israelis, they're like, "Hey, motherfucker, you can't say that." And then the rabbis, they'd be like, "What? I'm just quoting our book. I don't know. Why y'all mad at me? Oh, why y'all mad? I'm just quoting what we believe." So they always make the mistake of saying the quiet part out loud and always create headlines like the IDF chief rabbi who permitted wartime rape. Why? Because that's what Simone said. That Jewish that they believe in Jewish supremacy at the core. That if you are Jewish, I'm talking about the hardcore these rabbi people. That if you're Jewish, it's not a crime if you commit it against people who are not God chosen people. So every once in a while, you hear them say some shit that'll get caught up in the media, and it was supposed to do ideology. But go ahead, Kate. There's just one of the many examples.
Yeah. So that's actually perfect. And there are, so if you listen to these, the hardcore rabbis, your mind will be blown away. Okay?
It's crazy.
Yeah. So they don't have any political correctness or thought police censorship like we have, right? So like in Israel, you can spit on the Christians.
That's crazy.
Okay, and I've seen like videos where they spit on the nuns, and then they say "fuck your Jesus," stuff like that. So they hate Muslims.
Zionists think they're our allies. But go ahead.
Yeah, so dumb. So there's no such thing as a Judeo-Christian. Okay, so that's the first thing that the Americans have to get rid of that phrase. Okay, that's like saying vegan bacon. Okay, you cannot have a vegan bacon. So stop saying Judeo-Christian. Just be a Christian nation. So they play these games with words and legalistic stuff, and it's like this word is anti-Semitic, that word is anti-Semitic. This thought, if you just say, free from river to the river, then it means you want to kill the Jews. No, it just means they want to be free. Okay. Being free does not mean to kill others. It just means being free and to have the basic freedom that we all enjoy around the world.
Yeah, very well said. And as we begin to wrap this up, there's still a lot of things I want to pick your brain on. We definitely gotta do this again. Big shout out to my friend Didi Geopolitics. They're killing the game. Big shout out to our friend, Zoya as well. There's so many things that I ask you, but I gotta curate a little bit of this. I want to ask you about the United States posture against China, because I've been very obsessed with China because as an American, very jarring. And I was explaining this to my mom actually the other day. My mom is famously apolitical, but I'm like dragging her along on this journey again. She's very supportive. Like she's the kind of mom that she don't know shit about politics, but she like, I like Bernie because Nick like Bernie. You know what I mean? So I'm telling her about China. She don't know shit about China. She thinks China's a shithole. That's like the average American. Please don't judge my mom. But I'm like, I'll tell her one time, I'm like, man, I would love to visit China. She's like, what? Why do you want to go to China? I'm like, do you understand how far ahead China is from America right now? And I was showing her some stuff I see that you guys post on China. I follow all these journalists who document, and I have many of them on our channel. The Jason Smith, the Li Jings, all these Chinese journalists who I've been on a journey the last 2-3 years, learning a lot more about the country. And so many Americans have no idea how far behind we are than China. It's really radicalized in a lot of ways. I was telling my brother about how 91% of millennials in China own their homes. The average rent is around $500-$600, and that's in quote unquote expensive cities. And so I know I'm ranting here. I've just been a topic I've been obsessed on, and I see you report about this a lot. So I want to get your perspective on what Americans and what people on the West is missing about China, and why is the West so obsessed? And this is especially among the MAGA types who are obsessed with waging war against China because they're a threat to America. What's your thoughts, Captain, as we begin to wrap up soon?
Yeah. So they're not a threat. Okay. They're just being very, very successful. They studied all the Western economies from the 19th century, the 20th century, and they found a perfect the mix of socialism and capitalism. And they're being super successful. They grew the economy 60-fold in 40 years. And they are now number one in so many aspects. They're now number one in manufacturing. They're now number one in, the exports, trade. They are the number one trading partner for 130 countries in the world. And they are number one in skyscrapers. They are number one in bullet train. The middle class, they buy, the Chinese buy far more BMWs and the Mercedes Benz than the Americans do. Okay, so there is a huge, solid middle class. They also have the poor people working for Nike and Apple, making the low-end manufacturing. But what the socialist government does is that even the poorest person has the basic needs met. Okay,
Absolutely.
so well, you can go to a rural area and you say, "Hello, Mr. Wong, you only make $150 a month. So your life must really suck." He's like, "No, I don't have a mortgage.
Yeah.
I have a zero debt, and I pay $4 for my smartphone monthly bill, $1 for my water and the electricity. I work as a farmer, but the government provides me world-class tractors. So I can harvest like 100 acres, whatever." And
that's a common tactic
so
they use, by the way.
Huh?
And I'll pass it
Yeah.
right back to you, Ken. That's a common tactic they use, by the way, to brainwash Americans. I heard it my entire life. They will say stuff like, "Hey, don't you know you should be lucky to be American? Because in Russia, they make way less. The average salary of a Russian is way less than American," which is true. Like, they make way less than we do, but they get paid maternity leave, they get free health care, and the cost of living is overall decreased. And that's a trick that worked on me for a very long time. And most people don't understand that they get way more for their buck. That's why, even though they technically make less money than they do, they actually have a way higher quality of life, which blows the mind of Americans. But continue your thought, Captain.
Okay, so if you have to go see a doctor in China, so guess how much he charges for the basic visit? $1. $1. Okay, and and then you don't have to wait for like a month to see the doctor. Okay, so you just walk into the clinic or the hospital, and you wait for maybe 1 hour, and you get to see the doctor for $1. Right?
My mom is still waiting. My mom is still waiting for a medical procedure, by the way. Do you got so for all the capitalists say, "Oh, well, if you have socialized medicine, you have long wait times." Shut the fuck up. How long did it take you to get your goddamn doctor appointment? There's no reason for you to be American and ever repeat some nonsense like that. I gotta be respectful of their privacy, but I have my mom is going through a medical treatment. She's been waiting for months to get in. But anyway, continue your thought. It's just an absurd thing they used to discredit socialized medicine. But continue, Captain.
Right, and so you can find like a lot of. The Americans now they're making videos from China. So now the truth is not like, oh, it's a CCP propaganda. So these Americans are shocked. So but this American woman, she married a Chinese guy, and she lists all the expenses she had. She had a baby, so she listed the expenses for her, the 9 months of pregnancy. So for 9 months, altogether, she spent about $300 on doctors, X-rays, ultrasounds, medicines, vitamins, whatever. So that is, the prenatal care is like $1 a day, and so guess what it costs for a C-section? $60. $60, you get a C-section, and I
know
think
someone's still in debt over that. I know someone personally still in debt over that.
Yeah, and the kids go to the best universities in China, where they learn a lot more than in the U.S., and they graduate with zero college debt. Okay, there's no such thing as a student loan in communist China. Okay, so maybe you cannot speak out against the government rudely, but if you whatever the big city you go to in China, you can pick up the phone, and I think it is this number 1234. Okay, so maybe there's a 5. I forgot. But you dial, say 1234, and you get a person online within a few seconds, 5-10 seconds. And you can whine about anything you want. Okay, you can say my neighbor is too loud. There are potholes. When I go to the public library, it's too hot. We don't have, the air conditioning. Yeah, seriously, you can say that. Right? Whatever a complaint you have, so you can say that. And 90% of the complaints, they get resolved. Okay, and this happens in cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, where they have 15 million, 20 million, 25 million people, and they handle the complaints, so they solve the problems. So you cannot say, screw Xi Jinping.
Yeah, I saw a story, and I remember the right wing was covering this obsessively, where there was a protest in China because there was people upset over the lockdown policies, and the right wing was like, "See, China is finally furious, and they are uprising against Xi Jinping and their crazy authoritarian lockdown policies." And then it was announced a few days later, oh, China decided to change their lockdown policy in response to the people's anger. And then all the right-wing people who report on that story went quiet because it showed that the Chinese government is responsive to the will of the Chinese people, which goes against their anti-China propaganda. So those are great points you were bringing up.
Yeah. So, what they do is, they're like a strict parent, but this is how China has been since the days of, the Confucius. So he was the philosopher in 400 BC or something, and he talks about how a society should run, and he goes, if you are a son, so you have to respect your father, and if you are a father, you have to take care of the son, and the same thing between the people and the king. The people have to obey the king, but the king should spend all his time making sure that the people are happy, well-fed, and all that. So there is this the contract, social contract, and that's missing in the U.S., right?
Absolutely.
If you call the New York representative, the New York senator, and if you say, "Hey, man, I have some problems," he'll be like, "Fuck you! Why am I talking? Why am I talking to you? Who are you? If you give me $100,000 in campaign contributions, then I'll sit with you. But if you're just like a random Nick calling me to complain about the subway in New York City. Get out of here, So, so they have this social contract, and like they are very, very smart. Okay, so but they don't have slogans. Like if you ask Xi Jinping for a slogan, he wouldn't have a slogan. Okay, but he's going to give you a document, like a 40-page document on what he wants to do for China. You mean like, I'm going to build a middle class, I'm going to build the manufacturing, I'm going to make China #1 in semiconductors, I'm going to fix the environment, I'm going to clean up the air, clean up the water, I'm going to help the farmers, I'm going to raise the GDP per capita by 49% in 13 years, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, see? Okay, and they have this long list. Okay, so Xi Jinping doesn't give slogans like Trump. He's like very scientific.
Yeah.
It's like very logical, scientific, and they get the job done. And they usually say something that they will do, and they will do it like way much more. So for example, a decade back they said by 2030 we are going to have 50% of the cars the electric cars, the new cars. Okay, they've already reached that goal by late 2024. 50% of all the new cars sold in China are the electric cars. So they set goals, and they want to take care of so like there is because in the US Biden just stepped down, right? He's going to step down, and the poll shows that only 6% of the Americans think he did a great job. 6%. Right? So like what is so like where is the accountability? I think that if the president has a 6% approval rating, I think the Americans should send the guy to jail.
I agree. And our Congress only has a 13, or the United States Congress only has a 13% approval rating as well. So I don't want people to misinterpret that it's only the president that's fucking up. It's the entirety of the political system. Congress, the Supreme Court, the executive branch, the presidency, all deeply underwater. The media institutions, it's despised by the American people. But go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, like say, for example, like you pay somebody to paint your house, and he paints only 6%, 13% of the house, and then he leaves. You're like, get the fuck back. I'm going to kick your ass. So give me back my money. So this is the problem in the U.S. Like, but there's no shame. There's no, but there's no accountability. People, the politicians just do a terrible job, and they're all bought and paid for by the oligarchs and a certain foreign country we shall not mention. So and then they say, oh, but you have the freedom. What good is the freedom? But like in China, even a woman can walk around Beijing at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. She can go jogging. Okay, so nobody's going to do anything bad to her. So but try that in Central Park at like 9 p.m. It doesn't even have to be 1 a.m. So it's so scary. So you don't have the freedom of safety. So you don't have the freedom to retire happily in America, for most people. Most people, they have to work their asses off, and they can barely save money. And then by the time they're 65, they're broke. That's not freedom.
I know someone I'm very close to who's in one of the most talented artists you will ever see in your life. Like he's great at drawing comics. Like he could easily like make his like own Marvel comics or whatever, but he's very afraid to pursue that because there's no healthcare in being a freelance artist. So he has another job I won't name simply so he can have healthcare. And he was never able to pursue a dream. It's something we talk about all the time. He never had the freedom to pursue his dreams because we live in a chaotic capitalist system. So are you truly free if you don't even have the ability to pursue stuff you want to do in your life because we live in an inherently chaotic system? Just something to ponder in a philosophical way for all the people who say, "Oh, America, the land of the free." Are we truly free if you don't have the ability to move wherever you want? Like there are many people who can't afford to live in quote unquote high income areas, which is why I bring up the average rent in China all the time. Because if you're Chinese and you want to live in a modern city, many of them can because the rent is manageable. But if you're American, you can't afford. And I don't remember the exact stat. I saw a stat where it showed like insane amount of Americans, like 80% of Americans can't afford to live in quote unquote middle income areas. If you don't have the freedom to live where you want in your own country, is that freedom? You have to live in the slums. You only can be in the slums. Is that freedom? But sorry to interrupt, Catherine, because that's a very
So that's exactly right. So you don't really have financial freedom for like maybe 75% of the Americans. The top 10-20% have a very good life. There's no doubt. But you have like 75-80% of the Americans don't have financial freedom. They don't have freedom of personal safety, and you really don't have freedom of speech. Okay, so like there is a window, there is a window within which you have freedom of speech. So even like on the X, a lot of people have gotten demonetized over the last 5-6 months, and millions of the accounts have been banned. Many of them are like bots, but let's say but thousands of really good accounts have been banned on X. So and on Facebook and YouTube, my God, there's no freedom of speech. So I talked to one person. I was doing like an interview like this, and I said why I don't believe in the COVID vaccine. So I said like maybe our 2 sentences on that. Because just 2 sentences because I knew that it was kind of a touchy topic, and just for those 2 sentences, the whole video was removed from the YouTube.
Wow.
So what kind of a speech is that? Freedom is that, and so freedom of speech, and then but do you have the freedom to elect the right people? You don't.
Yeah.
They give you Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Like this is one whore from the left and one whore from the right. And they're like, which whore would you like to marry? They're like, I don't want to marry a whore. I want a good, wholesome girlfriend. No, you don't get to have a wholesome girlfriend. You have a whore on the left, whore on the right. Choose one and shut up. So you don't have the freedom to elect your good politicians. Do you have the freedom to choose the corporations? No. You have zero control over what Google does, Bank of America does, Lockheed Martin. So if you're like a free country, like you should have the freedom to choose peaceful CEO for the Lockheed Martin, so he doesn't start a freaking World War III. But I talked to Americans on social media, and they always say, "Man, don't blame me. Well, I'm a very good person, but I have absolutely no control over what the U.S. does, what war it wages. So freedom is like an illusion. So it's like a big prison for the Americans, but the prison is full of porn, fentanyl.
Yeah, Americans think they're free because they have the right to start OnlyFans.
Yeah, exactly.
The Americans think they're free because even though they're struggling, they're in poverty. At least they can start an OnlyFans and shake their ass and get paid that way. Isn't that amazing? Isn't it amazing how we don't take care of the material needs of our women? We force them to show their titties on camera. That's how we, instead of actually providing people their needs. Anyway, Catherine, thank you for joining us for this foreign policy power hour. I don't want to take too much more of your time. Anything else you want to add? Any final thoughts? We definitely got to do this more often. It's always great.
Final thoughts is, people, we all live in this world for a very, very short time, So try to make the world a good place, and let's all, but try to leave behind, So like when we're about to die, we should say that my children and my grandchildren will be much better off than I had a life. So that should be our goal.
Very well said. Thank you for joining us, Catherine. Here's his Twitter for those who don't follow. He's a great follow to have on X. So make sure you guys check out Estel Catherine. Great geopolitical tweets and insights. It's great to have you join us. I appreciate you guys for waking up early. If you're watching the replay, make sure you guys check out our Patreon, like the stream, and show some support to my guests. I'll be back next week. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care.